This is the Almost Timely newsletter for the week of November 26th, 2023. Content authenticity statement. 100% of this newsletter's content was generated by me, the human. I was going to use AI to make a birthday image for ChatGPT, but I decided not to. When I do use AI, I'll disclose it prominently. There's a link in the newsletter as to why this is important, why you should be doing this for all of your content. So go check that out. What's on my mind this week? ChatGPT turns 1 year old this week. What have we learned? It is the 1 year anniversary of ChatGPT. 2022 was a landmark year with Stable Diffusion for images and ChatGPT for text on November 30th, 2022. It was ushered out the door by OpenAI, and since then, the world as we know it has changed dramatically. So what have we learned from this whiplash roller coaster ride that we now call generative AI? The first and most important thing that generative AI really changed is that non-technical, non-coding people got an on-ramp to AI. We have had AI for decades, and we've had very sophisticated, capable, and powerful AI for the last 20 years. However, that power has largely been locked away behind very high barriers to entry, very high technical restrictions. You had to know to code in languages like Python, R, and Scala, and Julia to make the most of it. Today, you code in plain language, right? Every time you give an instruction to Bing or Bard or Claude or ChatGPT, you are coding. You're writing code to create what you hope is a reliable, reproducible result from a machine in the same way that a programmer that programs in Python hopes. The implications of this change are absurdly large, almost too big to imagine, and we're only at the very beginning of this change. Clay Shirky once said that a tool becomes societally interesting once it becomes technologically boring, but AI is defying that particular trend. It is still technologically quite interesting, but the simplicity and ease of use that you typically associate with more mature technologies make it societally interesting as well. And those societal changes are only beginning to be felt. Recently, I was on a call with a colleague who said that their the company's management laid off 80% of their content marketing team, citing AI as the replacement for the human workers. Now, I suspect and I hope this is an edge case of the moment. Unless that team's content was so bad that AI was an improvement, I would find it difficult to believe the management knows what AI is and what's capable of and what it's not capable of. They are probably in for a rude awakening in about a quarter or two. But that raises the second major thing we've learned in the last year. The general public, people who are not like you, because you've been hanging out on this newsletter for a little while or a long while, but the general public doesn't really have a concept of what AI is and is not capable of. The Transformers architecture that powers today's language models is little more than a token guessing machine, right? A machine that can take in a series of arbitrary pieces of data called tokens, which in language models, these are corresponding to like 4-letter pieces of words. And then they attempt to predict what the next set of tokens is going to be in any given sequence. That's all they are. They're not sentient. They're not self-aware. They have no agency. Your dog has more agency than a language model. And they're incapable, even basic things like math, right? Just ask any of them to write a 250-word blog post, and you will almost never get 250 words, right? You'll get 80 words or 500 words. They can't count. The general public, however, appears to be under the impression that these tools are all-knowing, all-powerful magic wands that will either usher in a world that looks like Star Trek or Skynet, one of the two. And the various AI companies have done very little to rein in those extremes. In fact, a substantial number of people have gone on at length from the industry about the supposed existential threat that AI poses. Look, AI does not pose world-ending threats in its current form. A word-guessing machine isn't going to do much else besides guess words. Now, can you take that and put it into a computational architecture with other components to create dangerous systems? Yes, of course you can. In the same way that you can take a pressure cooker and do bad things with it to turn it into an explosives device, right? But the pressure cooker itself isn't going to be the cause of mass destruction, and AI in its current form isn't going to cause world-ending destruction. Now, there are major threats that AI does pose, but not because the machines are suddenly sentient or are going to take over the world. No. they're going to pose major, serious, and very near future threats that very few people want to talk about because it runs contrary to the many commercial interests that want people to focus on the usefulness of AI, and kind of created these existential threats as a sort of a straw man to deflect from the very real problems that it's creating right now. And there's two of them. One, structural unemployment. Two, income inequality. AI poses a structural unemployment risk. It is capable of automating significant parts of jobs, right? It automates tasks, but it can automate a lot of tasks, especially entry-level jobs where tasks are highly repetitive. Any kind of automation thrives in a highly repetitive context, and today's language models do really well with repetitive language tasks. We've previously not been able to automate those tasks because there's a lot of variability in language, even if there's not a lot of variability in the task. Right? You can complain any number of ways about how your burger was cooked, but it's all the same category. You're not happy with your burger. With language models' ability to adapt to language, those tasks are now up for automation. Everything from call center jobs all the way up to the CEO delivering talks at a board meeting, right? Sit on any earnings call. You'll be bored. And the execs largely spout platitudes about their company and read financial results. Both tasks the machine could do real easily. As a result, we will planet-wide, this is not just one country, this is planet-wide, need to deal with this risk of structural unemployment. And it will be disproportionate for any place where you have more challenged economic circumstances. Any country where a significant chunk of the economy is makes its money from outsourcing is a significant risk. Significant risk, because the companies that outsource their jobs from their home country to those countries are going to outsource those jobs to machines. Yes, a lot of jobs will be created, but many more jobs will be curtailed because that's the nature of automation. For example, in the USA, the economy here used to be mostly agriculture. Like 70% of the population did agriculture 2 centuries ago. Today, less than 1% of the population works in agriculture because we've automated so much of it. We've gotten really good at automation. Now, what the new jobs look like in the knowledge economy, we don't know, but they won't look anything like the old jobs. And there will be a long and painful period of transition as we get to that. The second risk that is substantially worsened by AI is income inequality. And here's why. It's pretty straightforward. When you have a company staffed by human workers, people, you have to take money from your revenues, from your profits, and you pay wages with it. And those human workers then go out to the broader economy and spend it on things like housing, food, entertainment, avocado toast, whatever, right? When you have a company staffed more and more with machines and just a few human workers to operate those machines, your company still earns revenues, still makes profits, but less of it gets dispersed as wages. More of it goes to your bottom line, which is part of the reason why every executive is scrambling to understand AI, because the promise of dramatically increased profit margins is too good to pass up. But those profit margins come at a cost, and that cost is paying wages to fewer people. What happens then is a hyper concentration of wealth. Company owners keep more money, which is great if you are an owner or a shareholder, not so great if you're unemployed. That goes back to structural unemployment. This sets up an environment where hyper-concentrated wealth becomes an even bigger problem than it is today. And for most of human history, that tends to end in bloodshed. Right? People who are hungry and poor eventually blame those in power for their woes, and the results are not pretty. So that's bad. What do we do about it? Well, the antidote to these two problems is one that we know can work, but requires a dramatic change in how we think about society. The antidote is universal basic income, funded with what many people call robot tax. Essentially, it's an additional set of corporate taxes on companies, not people, but on companies, to fund universal basic income. Now, where that's going to play out will depend very much on individual nations and their cultures. Societies that tend to be more collectivist, putting the group ahead of the individual, like Korea, Japan, China, other East Asian nations will probably get there quickly, along with democratic socialist economies like the Scandinavian nations, France, etc. They'll get there pretty fast. With a robot tax of some kind to fund universal basic income. Cultures that are hyper individualistic or very, very pro-business, like the USA, for example, may never get there, especially with corporations' lobbying strength to keep business taxes low. What does that mean? The places that are more collectivist will probably be nicer places to live and less subject to the inevitable results of income inequality. The third thing we've learned in this last year is how absurdly fast the AI space moves. Crazy fast. Back in March of 2022, there were only a handful of available large language models, right? GPT-3 was available back then, and they released GPT 3.5 that month from OpenAI, Google's BERT and T5, XLNet, a few others. Fast forward a year and a half, and we now have tens of thousands of language models. If we just look at the list of just from the big players since then, March 15th of 2022, you have GPT 3.5. April 4th, Palm 1 comes out from Google. November 30th, ChatGPT, of course, gets released, which uses the GPT 3.5 model. January 17th of this year, Claude 1 comes out from Anthropic. February 1st, ChatGPT Plus comes out. February 27th, Llama 1 comes out from Meta. March 14th, GPT 3.5 Turbo and GPT-4 get released. Now think about that. That is a year later, and OpenAI's released essentially 2 new models. May 10th, Palm 2 comes out, right? So this is, again, just a little bit more than a year that Google comes out with a new model. July 12th, Claude 2 comes out. That is 6 months after Claude 1. That's really fast. July 18th, Llama 2 comes out. Now we're talking 5 months apart. October 16th, GPT-4V and GPT-4 Turbo come out. Now, again, 6 months between GPT-4 and 4V. And November 21st, Claude 2.1 comes out, which is now, 3 months in between. 4 months. Either way, it's really, really, really fast. When you look at this timeline, it becomes clear that the power of these models and the speed at which they are evolving is breathtaking. The fact that you have major iterations of models like Llama and the OpenAI GPT models with 6 months between previous versions with a doubling of capabilities each time is unheard of, right? You don't generally release a product that has twice the power that quickly. When you look at a MacBook that goes 1 year to the next, it is not a doubling of capacity of what it can do. We are hurtling into the future at warp speed when it comes to language models. And in a recent talk with Andrej Karpathy, who's one of OpenAI's top technologists, he said, so far, when you look at papers and studies, there is no indication that we're running into any kind of architectural limits for what these language models can do. You just throw more stuff at them and they can do more, right? So your basic limitations are resource limits, like compute limits, but the architecture itself doesn't seem to have any limits yet. So the gains we get from models continue to scale with the resource we put into them. So you can expect the blistering pace of model change to continue or even accelerate. I was reading earlier today that Llama 3 is probably coming out in early 2024, which, again, is ridiculous. So that's quite a tour of the last year and change, the stuff that has happened since ChatGPT came out. Now that it's his first birthday, what lessons do we take from this? What should we have learned from this over the last year? 3 things. 1, AI is everywhere, and its adoption is increasing at a crazy rate thanks to the promises it offers and its ability to fulfill them in ways that previous generations of AI have not. We've talked about what AI can do for, I think the first AI talk I gave was 2015 to 2016, and that was on classical machine learning. Those techniques we talked about then, yeah, they have a lot of promise, but they're difficult, right, to use. When you fire up ChatGPT, that, by comparison, that's easy to use. The bottom line is this: AI will be an expected skill set of every knowledge worker in the very near future. Today, knowledge and skill with AI is a differentiator for you, right? It's something that sets you apart from other people. In the near future, it's table minimum. Right? This goes back to a refrain I've been saying in my keynotes for years. AI is not going to take your job, but a person skilled with AI will take the jobs, plural, of people who are not. One skilled worker with AI can do the tasks of 2 or 3 or 5 or even 10 people. So you owe it to yourself to get skilled up quickly. Second, the pace of change sure isn't slowing down. That means you need to stick close to the foundational models from the bigger companies, right? The GPT series from OpenAI, the Claude series from Anthropic, the Llama series from Meta, etc. Because these models have strong capabilities and they're adapting and changing quickly. As we saw, 6-month time periods, boom, boom, boom. If you can, avoid using vendors who build their companies on top of someone else's AI model, unless there's no other viable alternative, unless that vendor does something so specific that you can't find a way to get a ChatGPT to do it, right? There's so many companies like, oh, we can help you write blog posts. Well, yeah, you can do that with ChatGPT. You don't need a third-party company for that. A company like HeyGen that does really, really good video inference, yeah, there's not really a way to get ChatGPT to use that. So that would be an example of a case where that vendor would make sense to work with until something better comes along. The rate of change in these models is 6 to 9 months apart between major updates. Any vendor that builds on a specific model runs the risk of being obsolete in half a year, right? So in general, try to use foundational models for as many tasks as you can. Third, everyone who has any role in the deployment of AI needs to be thinking big picture about the ethical and even the moral implications of the technology. This is probably a little on the granola crunchy side of things, but profit alone can't be the only factor we optimize our companies for, or we're going to create a lot of misery in the world that will, without question, end in bloodshed. That has been the tale of history for millennia. Make people miserable enough, and eventually they rise up against those in power. Torches, pitchforks, you name it, it's not going to be pretty. So how do we do this? One of the first lessons you learn when you start a business is to do things that don't scale. Do things that surprise and delight customers. Do things that make plenty of human sense, but not necessarily business sense. As your business grows, you do less and less of that because you're stretched for resources, right, and time and people. But if AI frees up a whole bunch of people and increases your profits, guess what you can do? That's right. Keep the humans around and have them do more of those things that don't scale. Go back to your roots as a startup. I'll give you a practical example. Today, humans who work in call centers have very strict metrics they must operate by. My friend Jay worked in one for years, and she said she was held to a strict 5-minute call time. Anyone who called the bank that she worked at, she had to get the customer off the phone in 5 minutes or less, or she gets penalized for it, right? So what's the net effect? Customers get transferred around, round robin at the 4-minute, 58-second mark, or they just get hung up on because the metric that employees are measured on is time, not outcome, right? The company didn't give a crap about the outcome because no one ever stayed on the line long enough to complete the survey to complain about it. So the employees optimized for the metric they were given, and they delivered substandard service, miserable service, but they hit their numbers, 5 minutes. Now, suppose AI tackles 85% of the call volume. So you have these robots that can spend time on the phone, cost you not much more, right? Because you're not paying salary for the robot to do that. And it handles all the easy stuff. Hey, I forgot my password. Hey, what's the repayment term of this? Hey, I was late with my payment. Easy questions that the machines can handle. That leaves only the difficult stuff for the humans. Now, you would probably, if you were a forward-thinking, in this case, bank, you would cut your human staff some, but then you remove the time limits for the humans, right? And you instead measure them solely on outcomes. Customers will actually make it to the end of the call to complete the survey because they don't get bounced around to 18 different employees just so that no one is on the phone for more than 5 minutes. And if an employee is empowered to actually take the time to help solve the problems, your customer satisfaction scores will probably skyrocket. Now, this would be contingent as a business owner on you accepting that you won't maximize your profits. Doing so, you'd have to get rid of most of your humans. But if you kept the majority of humans that you currently have now, you'd have somewhat lower costs because AI can scale. But retasking the humans you do keep to solve the really thorny problems would let you scale your business even bigger because the easy stuff solved by machines and the harder stuff solved by the majority of humans you kept around for that purpose. Will companies do this? Some will, some won't. However, in a world where AI is the de facto standard for handling customer interactions because of its low cost, your ability to differentiate with that uniquely human touch might become a competitive advantage. So give that some thought. Real simple analog. You used to ride horses all the time, right? And now you drive in cars all the time. And now going for a horse ride, right? You go to the local tourist shop and you ride on a horse-drawn carriage around the downtown of the city and stuff, costs you way more than a car does because it's that unique touch. It's that unique experience that people don't have anymore. As AI moves into that role, imagine how that would affect your business to have that horse-drawn carriage effect in your customer satisfaction. So those are the three big lessons that we see from 1 year after ChatGPT's release. So happy first birthday, ChatGPT. And let's see what the world of generative AI has in store for us for the year to come. All right. In other news this week did a fun episode with all of the OpenAI chaos. Katie and I did an episode of the Trust Insights podcast on business continuity planning when it comes to generative AI. Give that episode a watch or a listen. It's worth your time to think about how do we build some precautions into our use of generative AI so that if a major vendor implodes for some reason, you have a plan. You have an idea of what to do to offset that. December 13th, I've got a new course coming out, Generative AI for Marketers. If you pre-register, there's an ad in the newsletter for it. With code EARLYBIRD300, you can get $300 off the course. It'll be $4.99 until December 13th, after which is a $7.99. The course is a lot of material that is, I typically deliver full-day workshops. Normally, those workshops cost between $35,000 and $70,000 for a company. So you can get in right now and save yourself a whole bunch of money if you do that. Let's talk jobs this week. Lots of AI jobs. AI innovation, delivery, and business development at Deloitte. AI marketing project associate at Firm Pilot. AI strategist at Navy Federal Credit Union. Analytics engineer at Orbit Media Studios. Artificial intelligence partnership leaders at Deloitte. Cloud engineer at Tracken. Director of artificial intelligence at Tech One Search. QA engineer of data validation at Murmuration. Senior SEO strategist at Orbit Media Studios, strategic director at Surefoot, and web and data analyst at Southwatts. Lots and lots of AI positions coming up. Again, with all change, there is old stuff gets destroyed, new stuff gets created. So we're starting to see that already. In other news, we have a very fun read, Confessions of a Strategist on the strained relationship between X and agencies. So agencies are trying to figure out what to do with X, but more and more advertisers are pulling out because it turns out when you put commercial content next to Nazi content, no one's happy. We have a whole bunch of public relations stuff on the way generative AI is impacting that. Tech firms using generative AI tools to slash content production times, so more efficiencies there. Search Console Insights, how to read those results. We have tons and tons of OpenAI stuff. Microsoft's internal memos about the chaos at OpenAI. That's a fun read. We have Instagram statistics that matter to marketers, some new stuff from IBM on hybrid cloud approaches for unlocking generative AI, and then the usual fun stuff. I've been playing Diablo Immortal a lot on my iPad, which is a fun little free game. That is, upcoming shows. Social Media Marketing World in February, going to that. I'll be speaking there. No surprise about AI. The Australian Food and Grocery Council in Melbourne in May 2024. I'll be speaking about AI there. MACON, the Marketing AI Conference in Cleveland, September 2024. It's funny. The folks at the Marketing AI Institute were asking what my topic is going to be. I'm like, I don't know, because a lot can happen between now and September 2024. But the plan is to be talking about open source. And that may or may not be what actually happens because, again, who knows? But supposedly Meta will be releasing Llama 3 in early 2024. That was, again, supposedly has the same capabilities as GPT-4, but it's something that you could download onto your computer. If that happens, that will be a game changer for a lot of companies that are already getting great results out of Llama 2, but giving a GPT-4 quality results on models you can run on your laptop, That's a pretty big deal. So exciting things coming all around. That is the news for this week. For those of you in America, I hope you had a great Thanksgiving holiday weekend. I hope for everyone else, you just had a great weekend. Thank you for watching and listening and reading. Please do share this newsletter with your friends. If you're using Substack, there is a referral program in the newsletter. You can go ahead and sign up for the referral program just by sharing the links in there, and you appear on the leaderboard. Let's see, actually, I have not checked to see who is on the leaderboard lately, but there's a leaderboard and there's referral rewards. So if you share the newsletter with 100 people, you get a shout out in the YouTube channel. Here, you get, for 200 people, you get a shout out in the newsletter itself, and for 300 people, you get a half-hour call with me on any professional topic of your choice. So those are some of the bonus rewards if you choose to do that. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and if you want to know when new videos are available, hit the bell button to be notified as soon as new content is live.